Hello Python programmers. In this video, we will execute and complete assignment 7, which is due next week. Since we didn't have class today, I will take you through the steps of completing this assignment, and then you can turn it in. I am going to walk through my thought process. Hopefully this will give you an insight into how I think about solving problems and maybe help you get a good perspective. So I may make some mistakes and I may do some trial and error just to demonstrate that yes, we all go through that and it's okay. I have downloaded the assignment. And I notice that the first thing I have to do is go to this GitHub repo and fork it and then import it into Eclipse on my local machine. Now I can't do the fork because I'm already in the original account that owns the repo, but I can still import it into Eclipse. Make sure that you do that fork and make sure that you import it from your account, not from mine. Again, do the fork, then switch over to your account, and then do the import. I can't do that part because I only have one account available, and that's where the repo is. When I open this page, I see that there is something here. I'm not sure what just yet, if I was doing a little bit of investigating. But the first thing you would do is the fork. You can see there are 42 forks of this already, which are from previous students. And when you're watching this video, this number may be higher because it may already be forked by other students this semester. I'm really not sure, or I could act like I'm not sure. I don't know what this exactly is. I could drill down into the folder in the repo, and then I could see that yes, there is some kind of project here. This appears to be an Eclipse project. It's got the .project file. It's got the .pydeb project file. That just gives me a little bit of assurance that what I'm going to work with appears to be something that I can handle in Eclipse. Now, you know that I wouldn't give you anything you couldn't handle in Eclipse, but that's part of the thought process you might go through if you were investigating someone else's repo. This repo could be a Visual Studio project or a Jupyter notebook or a JetBrains project or any other kind of programming, or even just a repository of Word documents. A GitHub repo doesn't have to necessarily be a specific format. It's just a place to store files. And coincidentally, we're going to store our files in as part of a project that we know we can import into Eclipse in this class that we're taking now. So you have some confidence that you're in the right place. You've done your fork. Make sure that you switch over to your account. I don't have to do that because I'm already in my account. But when you do the import, you're going to want to import from your account, not from mine. It will be the exact same code as you see here, but it will be a copy of the repo in your account, not mine. I'll just grab this URL and I'll go back to Eclipse. I'll do import. What we want now is the utility to import from Git using the Git protocol, GIT. GitHub.com uses that protocol. There are other sites and other servers that also answer the same protocol. We are using GitHub.com. Select projects from Git. Click Next. We are going to clone a URI, Universal Resource Identifier. Since I copied the URI into my clipboard, Eclipse automatically populates this dialog. Eclipse recognizes it is a github.com based repo. It recognizes the name of the repo. You should see your account name here, not mine. If you see my account name, you missed that step, and you need to go back and make sure that you are importing from your account, not from my account. And then if you haven't authenticated, you don't need to do that to pull down a public repo. Now, I think every one of you should have authenticated already because we've done some commits and pushes in class. But if you haven't done that, or you don't have the credentials here, you're fine. You don't need them right now. Click Next. It goes out to the repo. It identifies the master branch. That's the default branch when a repo is created. There are no other branches. That's good news. You don't have any confusion about which branch you want to pull down. Click Next. Then it asks you where you'd like to put it. The default location should look something like C:\users/ your whatever account you're logged into the Windows computer under. And I'm logged in to a college computer using my UC credentials, therefore you see my 6+2 in that folder path. And all of your projects, repos that you import from GitHub will be put into this folder. You could put it anywhere you like on the disk, but it's nice to just keep them all in the same place. All right, once you've verified that this looks right, click Next. What happened then is the Eclipse GitHub plugin went out and downloaded a little bit of the repo, recognized that there is an Eclipse project in the master branch, and that's good. We expected that. It's asking you what to do now. Do you want to import that Eclipse project, or do you want to do something else? All we do here is take the default, import the existing Eclipse projects. We don't have to change anything here. Click Next. There's the project that it found. The project is called Assignment 7. And you can see you get a verification of where it plans to put that project. Nothing to change here. Click Finish. Then in your Project Explorer tab, you should see something like this. There is one package called SRC, and in that package are 2 modules. This is a little different from what we've done in the past couple weeks. We've got one package with 2 modules in it, but that's perfectly fine. And then there is a TTF file, which is named AARGH, AAARGH, and that's a true type font. And we're going to use that in the project, which we'll talk about here in a moment. This looks good. We seem to have everything we need. I would probably at this point stop and look at the code a little bit. I would observe that in main.py, there's my entry point. I know it's my entry point for 2 reasons. One is it's called main.py. That's our naming convention in this class. And the other is because none of the code is indented. It's not part of a function. And then if I look in assignment 7.py, I observe that there are 2 functions, 3 functions. And then there are some lines of code at the top which are not indented. That's okay. They will be executed automatically for you. You don't have to worry about those. But I see 3 functions. I recognize the syntax for functions. I see the keyword def. I observe that the code is indented. And that means lines 14 through 17 are part of that function. generate random string. I observe that that function accepts one parameter called length, and I see that it uses that parameter in a for loop to define the upper bound of that loop. Whatever I pass in as that parameter, that will define how many characters are in the random string that I am generating. This function then is there for you to call, and if I slide over to the right, it grabs a random character from this alphanumeric set of characters, and it appends that to the string. It does that as many times as it is told to do it, which would be length. Then it returns whatever that string is. You're just going to get a random sequence of characters, which will become the CAPTCHA that gets rendered graphically. Then the next function takes a parameter and draws an ellipse on a drawing surface using some random values for the size and location of the ellipse. You don't have to change anything here, I'll tell you that right now. So if this doesn't make sense, all you're going to do is call this function. Actually, it's going to be called for you. You don't even have to do anything. But you can see that that's in there. And then the third function is the one that does the main body of the work, generating the CAPTCHA image. This function at this time accepts no parameters. That's going to change in a moment. This function calls the generate random string function we saw a moment ago and passes it an argument of 5. That means we're asking for a random string of 5 characters. That would be the CAPTCHA string that has to be replicated when the user tries to get past that CAPTCHA. And after it gets the random string, it draws graphically on a drawing surface the ellipses and the string itself, and it does a little bit of hocus pocus, moves the characters up and down, left and right, varies the colors a little bit, and then you get the CAPTCHA. Theoretically, the CAPTCHA exists so that it can only be processed by a human, and it is resistant to bots who might try to be accessing that website that's being protected. This kind of works. There are, at this point in the development of the internet, there are some bots that are pretty good that can defeat CAPTCHAs. You don't see them as much anymore. You do see them now and then, but I think most of the time websites use a different kind of human authentication where they ask you to identify photos from a grid of photos. They might ask you to pick out a bridge from a list of 9 photos, and some have bridges and some do not. And I guess those are a little more fail-safe for human beings, and bots have a more difficult time processing those. But there are ways around those as well. If you ask me in class, I'll explain how any of those human detection algorithms can be defeated. The rest of the generate CAPTCHA function picks out random locations on the drawing surface, draws the characters, and finally returns 2 important things. The image itself that was created, you'd need that because you want to store it in a file somewhere and pop it up to the user on the web page. And then it returns the random string that it used to build the CAPTCHA. If you didn't know that, then you wouldn't be able to tell if the user actually replicated that string when they were trying to get past the CAPTCHA. And I hope I'm saying that right. CAPTCHA, CAPTCHA. All right, we have some interesting things here. We have a reasonable understanding of what's going on. In the main, we can see that the first thing we do is called generate CAPTCHA. That's going to create the drawing surface, create the random string, drop the characters somewhat randomly onto the drawing surface, vary the colors a little bit, draw some ellipses, and then print out the value of that string that the user would have to replicate, just to visually verify that we got something. Finally, what we're interested in then is we can do a show method. We can call the show method, and we can display that CAPTCHA on our screen. So that's the purpose of the program, is to generate that CAPTCHA, and then we would eventually store that to a file, put that file on our web server, and then present that to the user when they tried to access our site to verify that they were indeed a human being or a super smart alien. Does this run? Let's find out. I'm in the main. When I click run, it will attempt to execute the main, which is what I want to do. And there's my CAPTCHA. It looks kind of neat. It drops in a bunch of colored ellipses. It varies the characters a little bit. And I could store that to a file if I wanted to. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, it's got what kind of looks like a file name. It loaded it in my default graphics viewer. I guess that's photo viewer in Windows. That's pretty neat. This is not a Python program. This is Windows, but Python knows how to tell Windows to load a graphic and display it. That's what show does. Show sends a message to the operating system that says, here is a graphic, please display it for me, and then the operating system gets to decide the best way to do that. In the console tab at the bottom of my screen, there is the CAPTCHA string that I randomly generated in my code so that I know what the user was supposed to type in, and I can compare that. The next step would be to go to my web server, drop in this graphic that I created, and then compare that with the user input to see if they typed in the right string. I hope that gave you some overview of what we're up to here. Don't forget that you have to provide documentation for these modules. I'm not going to do it. You don't need to watch me type it in. You know what it is. But think about what you're typing. Don't just blindly copy paste something from a previous assignment. Put a little bit of thought into it. And I'm interested to see what people provide there. There are some decisions to be made when you fill in that documentation. Both modules should be documented. Make sure that you go to assignment07.py. Make sure that you go to main.py, provide that documentation. Also do this for me, rename the project before you turn it in. Use our naming convention. That way I can load all of your projects at the same time into Eclipse. If you don't do that, then I will have 30 copies of the project called Assignment 7, and I will have to load them one at a time. And that really slows me down. So our convention is that we uniquely name the assignment following the 6+2_assignment07 protocol. And that differentiates your assignment from everyone else's. It teaches you a good habit of following standards and practices, and it makes my life easier. All right, I'll just rename mine. I don't have to remember to do it later. All is well. If you made it to this point and your project did not run for whatever reason, we've made no changes to the code whatsoever, and your project did not run, then you need to get with me so we can figure out why that is. There may be some issue with your machine importing this project from GitHub. You never know, things happen. Don't wait until the last minute to get started on this, because if you need my support getting it imported, then you need to make time to come see me where we can do that. If we look back at the assignment, the first thing we need to do, according to the instructions, make the following enhancements to the project. Add parameters to the function generate CAPTCHA. Okay? Now we know that that's a function. It says it right there. We know what a parameter is. That's the parentheses enveloped symbol names after the name of the function. The two parameters are A, the number of characters in the string, 6 to 10, and then the file name where the CAPTCHA should be stored. Implement the save logic in the function. This function is going to get more capable. It is going to be able to take a parameter value and use that to determine the length of the CAPTCHA. Right now, you may remember it's just hard-coded to 5, which is limiting. But we're going to modify the function so that it can deal with numbers from 6 to 10 inclusive. That way I can have a really complex CAPTCHA of up to 10 characters, which will drive my users crazy. And I have to make sure that that value can't be less than 6 or more than 10. It says implement this logic in the function. You have to write that logic in the generate CAPTCHA function. Then the second one is going to be the file name. That will be a string. We will put no path name on the string. And we have to implement that logic. That means I have to go and figure out somewhere how to store an image to the disk. Now, I might not know how to do that right off the top of my head, but I can certainly research that. Now, generate CAPTCHA is already in the project, as we saw. It is in the assignment 07.py. It is in line 30. It has no parameters at this time, but we are going to add 2 parameters. This one, parameter A, the first parameter, says the number of characters in the string. The change order here in the document does not tell you the name of that parameter. That means you get to pick. I can go back into the code again and I can say CAPTCHA length. That sounds like a good name for that parameter. We want to use descriptive names. We get a lot of experience naming things, and that helps us down the road. The second parameter is the file name where the CAPTCHA should be stored. And what's a descriptive name for that? How about file name? We could say, to even be more descriptive, target file name. That might work too. Since you weren't given names in the homework, then you get to pick them. Those names immediately get underlined because we are not using them. And I think if we hover just right, it'll tell us that we're not using them. Unused parameter. And that's spot on correct because we haven't used them yet. That's Eclipse just looking ahead and saying, hey, Bill, are you sure you want to do this because you're not using these parameters? It seems like a waste of time, Bill, to put these in here if you don't do anything with them. We do plan to do something with them. All right, we saw earlier that this number 5 here is actually the desired length of that random string. We don't want it to be 5 anymore. We want it to be CAPTCHA length. The first change we'll make is to just paste it in there. This allows whoever is calling this function to decide how long that string should be. We're not stuck with 5 characters anymore. The next thing we need to do, referring back to the document, is implement logic in the function to make sure it's between 6 and 10. We don't want the user typing in 100 or -5. some ridiculous number. It's up to us then to enforce that limit 6 to 10 inclusive. I left you a little bit of leeway here too. I didn't tell you what to do if it's not within those limits. That would be some kind of if expression. If captcha length is less than 6 or captcha length is greater than 10, we have a problem. We only want to deal with numbers that are between 6 and 10 inclusive for the length of that string. So what my decision will be arbitrarily is I am going to set that number to 10. That's my decision. I didn't tell you what to do if that problem pops up. It says limit the value to 6 to 10 inclusive, implement this logic in the function. But I didn't tell you what to do. Do you throw an exception? Do you crash the program? Do you just give up? Do you return immediately? Well, no. I decided that I would be somewhat friendly. And I would say if you pass me a number for the length of the string, the length of the captcha, that is out of range, I'm just going to clamp it at 10 and then be on my merry way. And if you don't like that, tough. That takes care of the first change, A and B. So we added the parameter and we enforced the length requirement on that parameter. The second one, I'm sorry, that was just A. The second one, B, what will we use, what file name will we use to store the captcha after it's been created? Now I don't know how to do this. I'm in a panic. How do I save a graphic to the disk? I don't even know. If I go back to the code again, I've got to first find where that thing is, and it happens to be right there. That's the thing I need to save. I don't want to save it until I'm done creating it. The second decision to make then is where do I put the code that saves the image? That's going to be all the way near the bottom, right there. Save the image on the disk as whatever the file name is. I use target file name. I have to now figure out how to save an image. It's called captcha image. That's the name of it right there in line 40. I don't know how to save it. Let's take a wild guess. How about captcha image, CAPTCHA, image, dot. When I press the dot, look at the magic that happens on my machine. It shows me all the things I can do to that variable. Now, I know very little about this variable right now, but I can see that it has a lot of capabilities. And if I scroll down, maybe there is something called save. There's save right there. Is that what I need? If I click on that, it says save this image under the given file name. And it says the first parameter, FP, is a file name. The second parameter, format equals none. It looks like I can skip that parameter. I think then all I need is save target file name. And that hopefully will fulfill the requirement of 1B on the homework document a file name where the CAPTCHA should be stored, implement the save logic in the function. There's my attempt to do that. Strategically, I had to decide where to put that code. I put it right at the bottom, right before the function returns, because I figure at that point I've done everything I could do to create that CAPTCHA, and I'm not missing anything when I save it at that point. And I have left out some things. I haven't done any error handling at all. That means if something goes wrong with this file name, for example, it's just got an invalid character that the operating system can't deal with, then I might have this function throwing an exception and crashing my code. But again, the homework document doesn't say anything about error handling. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm trying to get you accustomed to reading from a spec, thinking about what's in the spec and what's not in the spec, and then deciding how to handle both of those conditions. I would say that in a production environment, there might be an implicit understanding that you do some error handling. That's going to be based on the team that you work with, the way they develop code. In this case, though, the spec is meant to be explicit, and if something is omitted, then you can pretty much count on that it doesn't need to be there. I've made the changes for step 1. I added the parameters. I added logic to the generate CAPTCHA function to deal with those parameters. I think I'm in good shape. We know that we develop incrementally. That means I would like to run the program at this point to see if what I did is correct. But I will have a problem. If you go back to the code, you can see that in the main, I'm calling the function generate CAPTCHA with no arguments. The function requires that I provide 2 arguments to be put into those parameters. Therefore, when I do run this, it's going to crash. There's my error. Whoops. The error says generate CAPTCHA missing 2 required positional arguments. That's a pretty good error. It tells me that, hey, there's supposed to be something in those parentheses when you call that function. It also shows me the line number and provides a link. If I click on that link, there's the line number that I was talking about a moment ago where I need to provide those arguments. I can overcome that pretty easily, I think. I can just put the arguments in there. I want 6 characters in the CAPTCHA, and the file name will be test.jpg. How about that? It's a string. That will make the error go away. Now I have a function that requires 2 values for those 2 parameters. I am providing those 2 values as arguments to the function. The terminology, the verbiage, when you call the function, you are providing arguments. Our arguments in this case are 6 and then test.jpg as a string. When you look at the function itself, when you look at generate CAPTCHA, what's in the parentheses are called parameters. I differentiate between arguments and parameters. And I have gotten into arguments, discussions with people on Reddit who think that they are the same thing, and they are most certainly not the same thing. But we will call these parameters, which is the correct term, and we will call these arguments, which is the correct term for those. When you call a function, you pass arguments. When you write a function, you define parameters. Now they map together very, very closely and easily. The first argument maps to the first parameter. The second argument maps to the second parameter. But they do have different names. This takes the error away, and I think I can run now. Let's try. I got another error. It says a whole bunch of stuff, and I always like to just scroll to the bottom and see what the initial problem is. Cannot write mode as JPEG from E. I don't know what E is, but there's a whole bunch of links here and a whole bunch of stuff. It's kind of overwhelming. If you go all the way back to the top, you can see our problem initiated. Our problem originated in line 9 of the main. And there's also another link to line 5, is it? 56, line 56 of assignment 7. Let's look at that. And the error is originating in this line that we wrote, this image.save. We thought that was the correct way to do that, but apparently we did something wrong. There are different ways to approach this. You could throw up your hands and become an Amish farmer and not have to worry about it anymore. I am going to Google or use some search engine on the error message. That's where I'm going to start. We could be in the situation where we know nothing about this error message. It looks like total gibberish to us, but if we build a search phrase, maybe we can track it down without too much pain. Back to my browser. Whoops, that's not my browser. There he is. New browser tab. I'm going to paste in quotes, the error message, and that will narrow down my search results and require that entire string to be present in the search results. I won't get search results that just have the word JPEG or just have the phrase RGBA. That will narrow it down quite a bit. And then I'm going to say Python. And I'm going to see if that's enough. I think it will be. My first hit is our old friend StackOverflow. The title of the question on SO appears to be right up my alley, exactly what I want. Cannot write mode RGBA as JPEG. And I'm not even going to read the question. I'm going to look for some code. And I don't see anything different in the code except there's a convert statement there that's converting something to RGB. I don't have that. I have the save. I also don't have the open. And I'm a little bit nervous now because I know I don't need to open a file. I created the file from scratch. Therefore, the open isn't going to help me. I'm starting to wonder then if this is a path that I don't want to go down. What I could do is try to take this second line where it does some kind of conversion and try to make that work and fix my problem. But that might be a little more effort than I need. I'm going to back up and just try another result in my search. The second hit that I got is image conversion cannot write mode RGBA as JPEG. It looks like the same error message but a different Stack Overflow question. Let's see what it has to say. Doesn't have anything to say, does it? Come on, question. Look what happened. Stack Overflow is apparently offline for maintenance. This looks very bad for us and probably for them because in the middle of the business day, unexpectedly, they have apparently gone offline. So they are probably not going to be someone to help us right now. Another option I could have was to continue scrolling. Scrolling. Here is the third hit, says cannot write mode RGBA. That's the same error that I was searching for. This guy is on the GitHub site. Now, GitHub isn't usually a place you go to find solutions to software problems. It's a place you go to find software. And if you look closely at this link, it appears to be an issue or a bug or a concern related to our graphics library. And I don't think that's going to help me. I'm going to skip that one. The next one is Coderosaurus. Never heard of that. Don't like the name very much. I will open it just to see what I get. You're always taking a risk when you do this. And this is a total disaster because their CSS is bad and they've got a Firefox logo taking up 3/4 of the screen. I have no patience for that. I'm not going to scroll through that little tiny window. Hit my back button again. There's another Stack Overflow. We're pretty sure we can't get there. There's another github.com. We're pretty sure they are still down. The next one is declare code, another one I've never heard of. But let's take a look. It would be time now to start scrolling, and it says the solution for this can be found here. This is just clickbait, is all this is. Again, there's what we saw earlier on SO, is that they're doing some kind of convert to RGB and then doing the save. They're creating a new image is what they're doing, and then they're able to save that as a JPG. So we can come back and try that. Let's copy the one line of code that we think we need, which is that convert statement, ignoring the open for now because we already have an image. Go back to Eclipse. Let's paste in right above the save statement. Let's do a conversion. And our image name is not IM. We have to change the name of the image to reflect our image name. Then we have to fix the font, I think, because these quotes are not matching. And it still has a big red line under it, but the big red line went away. The syntax is correct now. What that does is create a brand new image using a different encoding format, red, green, blue, RGB. And we're going to want to use this name, RGB_IM, as the thing we're going to save. Therefore, we're going to copy paste that down there. Okay. And this is our first attempt at making this error go away. We're doing some kind of conversion on the image to change the format of it, which allows us to store it the way we want to. This is a little bit ambitious for us. I wouldn't expect you to be able to solve this problem during an exam. I'd expect you to be able to make an effort in the context of a homework, but I wouldn't expect you to be able to solve this in the context of an exam. I wouldn't put you through this. We have done our changes. We take a look at the code. There are no indications of syntax errors. There are no red underscores. There are no error flags. Let's go back to the main and see if we fix the problem. Nothing has to change in the main. Okay, that worked. Therefore, by converting the image to the RGB format, we were able to get past that save. And the image popped up in the photo viewer, OBL5QB. Yours might be different depending on the random number generator, but mine says OBL5QB. And in the console tab, OBL5QB, there's the CAPTCHA in text format. And hopefully, Over here in our project, we will now see the file that got stored. I have to refresh the package. Eclipse doesn't automatically pick up that new file. And there it is right there, test.jpg. And I can hopefully double click on that and Eclipse knows how to load it. There it is. We have implemented then and successfully tested the first change that we needed to make to our program. And we're feeling pretty good. If we go back to the document, change 2 says one font has been provided, and that's the arg.ttf. That stands for True Type Font, TTF. It says add several new fonts and use them randomly when writing the individual letters onto the CAPTCHA. You can download True Type fonts online. Be sure to store them in the same folder as assignment07.py unless you add paths. And we'll just put them in the same place that we see the existing TTF file. We have to go find some fonts now. Fonts can be found online. A lot of them are free. And we can download them directly into that part of our project. If we go back to the browser again and I type free True Type fonts, you get 1,000,000 hits. The first one says 1001 free fonts. The second one says True Type fonts. The third one says TT fonts. Just be careful and try to find a site that looks reputable. Don't download too much. And I really don't know any site that I'm particularly enamored with to do this. I'm just going to pick the first one. Hopefully DuckDuckGo is not going to steer me wrong. Here's my cookie agreement. They're organized alphabetically. There's a lot of fonts here. Well, let's just pick Alien. That sounds like fun. Maybe they came over on a Chinese spy balloon. There are 56 free Alien fonts. There's one called BEGOK V15. Is that Klingon? I don't know. There's a download button. That's encouraging. There's a font with Star Wars characters. It wouldn't be very good in a CAPTCHA. I think that would probably defeat the purpose of the CAPTCHA. There's one that looks like some other foreign language. Probably again would frustrate people. There's one that's even worse. There's Quirky Robot. That looks interesting. If I click download, I would like to have Quirky Robot. It sent me the font almost immediately. All I have to do is copy the font. Do a little copy here. Go back to Eclipse, and maybe I can just paste it in using the Project Explorer. How about that? And let's refresh. That didn't seem to work, but that's okay. Let's bring up the properties of the project, just like we would if we were going to turn it in. Bring up the System Explorer. Okay, so at this point you know you would stop and zip this folder and be on your way. But let's open up the folder and go into the SRC and then paste in there. And there's my Quirky Robot. All right. If the font is trustworthy, it's in the right place, we should be good to go. According to the assignment, add several new fonts. You can see how I did that one, and you can replicate that to get more fonts. The next thing to do is says use them randomly when writing the individual letters onto the CAPTCHA. Oh my goodness, that sounds terrifying. How do I do that? If I go back to my code, I can close out of this properties dialog. If I look in the generate CAPTCHA function, Where is it using the existing font? Right there. It's taking this font and it's creating something called a image font. Then it uses that to write the letters onto the drawing surface. So what I need to do then is at this point, I need to select a random font from all the fonts I have. Instead of just hard coding this font in here, I need to select a random font. This isn't really too bad because the fonts are strings as far as I'm concerned. They're file names that are stored as strings. You can see it's got quotes around it. That just represents the file name on the disk in the project. And I know that the one file is called AARGH and the other one, if I refresh this, is called Quirky Robot. All I need to do then is build some kind of data structure that I can put all the strings into and then randomly select from that data structure. Well, when in doubt, put things into a list. The list is kind of our go-to. So let's make a list. My fonts equal. We make a list by opening square brackets. And then let's put the names of the fonts in quotes. Again, these are just referring to file names. The first one is ARG. The second one is Quirky Robot. I can copy that name over here, or I could type it in, either one. I have a list now, and you can see that it'd be easy just to extend this list. That would be pretty easy if you add more fonts. The next thing I need to do is randomly select a font from this variable. How do I randomly select something from a list? Oh my goodness. How do I randomly select something from a list? If only there was a place I could go that would tell me how to do that. Back to my browser. Python. Random from list. The first hit says select random element from a list. Second one says pretty much the same thing, and so on and so on. I'm not even going to try Stack Overflow because it appears to still be down. But I'll try this one, datag.io. Scroll past all the boilerplate. It says I can use something called random.choice. That looks wonderful. It gives me an example. I noticed that I need to import random. Right there, it says import random. Let's go back and put that into our code before we do anything else. We can put it right here if we want to. Import random. That's a bad idea because it's in a loop and it's going to get imported over and over and over, but we could do that. What I prefer and what you've seen me do this semester is I put the imports at the top. Okay. That goes out and gets the random number generator library. It only happens once. When this module is loaded the first time, I don't have to worry about it anymore. All right, I've done that. Back to the browser window again. And it says that I'm going to say random.choice. And the argument passed to the choice method is the list from which I want to select. That looks really easy. Random.choice. Go back over here. And right after I built my list, I'm going to say random font equals random dot choice. What am I choosing from? The My Fonts list, just like that. Again, I get an error, or sorry, it changes to a warning. It says unused variable. That's correct. I have established a random font, but I am not doing anything with it. Well, I just need to put it into the code where I used to have the hard-coded font name. And there are my lines of code to implement that change as given on the assignment. I create a list of fonts. They're just strings that they refer to file names. I choose a random value from that list, and then I use that randomly chosen value when I create the font style. All right, if I run this now and I did everything right, we should see different fonts appear in that graphic when the CAPTCHA is created. And I think the fonts are significantly different from each other. It will be pretty obvious if it does what we want it to do. Take a quick look. I don't see any warnings or errors except for this little guy up here which says I'm not using I, but that's fine because I'm correctly not using I. Back to the main, click Run, cross your fingers. There it is. I can't tell. I can't tell if those are different fonts or not. Right away, I'm losing confidence in myself. It says DLY, QGK. They all look like the same font to me. So I go back to my browser again, and fortunately I still have the page where I got the fonts in my history. If I look at that font again, it looks like it's very square and kind of tilted sometimes. I don't see that in the graphic that I ran. I don't see that font. They all look the same. So I'm not sure that I'm doing this correctly. At this point then, I have to debug. I'm kind of convinced myself that the code looks right. The results do not look right. I have to decide what to do. The first thing I'd like to do is I want to know what random font I chose to make sure that I'm actually getting random fonts. I want to put a print statement in. I put it in the wrong place. I'm going to need to move it down below. And this is going to just print out what random font I think I'm using. In line 46, I create my list. In line 48, I choose a random value from the list. In line 49, I print the random value. I'm trying to get incrementally through the logic to see if I'm creating what I think I'm creating. Having added that print statement, I will just run it again. Go back to the main, click Run. Well, look at that. That looks like the robot font. Maybe I just wasn't patient enough and I wasn't getting randomly selected values. But that looks like my robot font. And I go back to, I'm going to close this image. I don't really need it anymore. And I'm going to go look at the output in the console tab. And there's Quirky Robot right there. So it did get a random font from my list. Okay. So it chose at random Quirky Robot. But they're all Quirky Robot. All those characters were the same font. They didn't look different. What am I doing wrong then? I'm getting a random font, but I'm getting it one time. I'm not getting a random font for every character that I'm printing individually. That's my problem. It's not a bug in the way I'm choosing the random font. It's a bug in when I'm choosing the random font. So if you look what I did, all this font logic is happening before line 55. Look down at line 55. There's where I'm stepping through the letters one at a time. My error then is that I need to select a font for every letter, not just a font before I start printing the letters. I only get one font. All this code needs to move. Everything I've got highlighted here needs to move down to line 55.5 and be inside the loop where I process one letter at a time. That will solve my problem, I think. So I am going to cut this highlighted code. All the font stuff is going to go inside that loop. And I'll go down to the line right inside that for loop. I'm going to do a paste and probably make a bit of a mess. All this has to be indented. All right. There's all that code. It works. We debugged it. It picks a random font. But now it's going to pick a new font or possibly a different font for every character in the string. All you're going to have to do is come back and add more fonts right there. More fonts. If I can make it work with 2, though, I know that my logic is right. And then when you come back and add more fonts, it should still work. Let's find out now. Go back to the main, click Run. Look at that. There's a 2 that looks like the ARG font, and then there are other characters that look like the quirky robot. Now I have a pretty good level of confidence that I am randomly picking a font for each character that I render on the drawing surface. If I look at my console tab, you can see that as I went through each letter in the string, I printed out the font, and there were indeed 2 instances of the ARG font and 4 instances of the quirky robot font. That's great. I'm feeling really good now about what I've done. I'm going to go back to my generate CAPTCHA function and take out that debug statement where I was printing the font name. I don't need that anymore. I'll just comment that out, so in case something else fails, I need to come back later, I'll still have it in there. Run it again just to make sure. And there it is. The 2 in that CAPTCHA, that character 2 appears to be Quirky Robot, and the others appear to all be the ARG font, but that's the way randomness works. You don't know what you're going to get. Good. I think I've implemented successfully items 1 and 2 in the change list. And then item 3 is extra credit, which I'm going to let you figure out. It's not hard. All you have to do is figure out how to rotate a character on an image before you draw it. It's not difficult at all. So if you need some extra credit, there's an opportunity to pick that up. Go online, do a search, find some donor code, and get it to work. All right, that's a completion of the assignment. It's going to be up to you to clean it up, add the documentation, rename the project, provide the results, and the results will be a pretty snip of your neat little CAPTCHA with the different fonts in it. Those are always fun for me to look at. Then make sure that you name it correctly and turn it in. Hopefully that helped you out. Any questions, come see me or email me. You can always send me your project along with a detailed explanation of what the problem is and what you have tried already to fix it and how to reproduce the problem, and I'll be happy to help you. So thanks for listening and have a great day. Bye.